Well, hello and welcome to another C# tutorial. This time we're going to be posting to a REST API, of course using C#. And our user story, so as a developer, I want to make a post request to a REST API, should have in brackets using a C# Windows client. Why do we want to do that? So that we can add a new data object to our endpoint repository, which is a kind of fancy way of saying we're going to create something in a database. Acceptance criteria, so basically at the end of the tutorial you should be able to make a post request to a REST API using C#, and as a consequence of that you'll more than likely create something in a database somewhere. Ingredients, Windows PC, in case you're interested. I'm using Visual Studio Community Edition, mainly because it's free and available from Microsoft. Web browser, running the JSON parser in that, but you know, it's not that mandatory actually for this video. And perhaps most importantly, you'll need access to a REST API that can accept post requests. And as mentioned before, I'm using Jira to do that. And I've just got a couple of points about how I've set that up. If you're interested, leave a comment in the comments trail in the video, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction in how you can do something similar. And 20 to 30 minutes of your time, which should be more than enough. Very straightforward tutorial structure. Very quick bit about HTTP verbs, just to help position the conversation. I mentioned this a few times throughout the video, but we pick up where the authentication tutorial finished. So if you look on the channel, there's a bit about authenticating to a REST API. That is where we pick up from. So because we're reusing an old project, we're doing a bit of tidy up, just to tidy up some UI elements that aren't required as part of this tutorial. And then we begin coding. There's actually not that much code. It's pretty straightforward. And then we'll test it with our API just to show you that it all works. Lab setup is super simple. This REST client here is what we'll be working on, and that's a C# Windows Forms client type project. I use Firefox. Ignore the live HTTP headers. That was just something I haven't removed from a previous tutorial. You don't need that. And then of course my REST API setup. I got CentOS VM running Jira. Our wireframe, I'll go through this in a little bit of detail. If you've followed any of the other tutorials, this will be very familiar to you. The only two main things I've added are this drop down, which allows you to select the verb that the request is using. The request URL will go in here. You wouldn't obviously put this on a kind of a nice user type application, but for our purposes, it's nice just to labor the point by having that drop down. And the other main user interface element that we are adding is this text box here, where we're basically going to add the data that we're sending to the server that will create the object. As part of this tutorial, I'll be using a JSON data format, but your API may use something else like XML, but that's where it will go, and it's really just a string. Username and password, because we'll need to authenticate. Very unlikely that you'd be able to do a post request where you're creating stuff in a database without authenticating. I think that would be quite unusual. And then a response box where we'll get any error messages or success messages back from the server. And then a clear and copy buttons. Not really mandatory as part of this tutorial. I'm just adding them so that going forward it's easier for me to demo the solution. Just saves a few mouse clicks. Class diagram, again, the only thing we've actually added new based on what we've done previously is the post JSON attribute, which, going back to the wireframe, is the data that we're actually sending to the server that will cause an object to be created. And of course that just relates to the post verb that I think was already in our enumeration. And then finally, just a very quick bit about HTTP verbs. I'm not going to labor this too much. Basically, you know, using the CRUD syntax, create, read, update, and delete, there's an associated HTTP verb. So we're really focusing on the post verb, which relates effectively to a create action. That's about it. That's really all you need to know. Get relates to read, very simple. Delete obviously relates to delete. I'm being a bit sarcastic there by saying I'm not sure what it does. Put and patch are the only two things that are maybe worth a bit more conversation. Put was part of the original RFC specification and allowed you to update an object. The downside of the put method was that it updates the whole resource. So if you're updating a user object, you'd have to send all of that object to the server in order to update even just one attribute, such as last name, for example. So very inefficient. They realized that and they came out with the patch method. So it doesn't update, but you don't have to supply the whole object data as part of the update. You just supply the attribute that you want to update, which is much better. So very quick bit about HTTP verbs, really just to labour the point that we're going to be creating something in a database. And with that, I think it's time to start a project. Okay, let's get cracking with some coding. So here is our base project. Now it will look very familiar to those of you that followed the authentication video. That's where we're picking up from, so you'll be familiar with this. For those of you that haven't watched it, I'd suggest you go back and review that and you'll get to this point. So just to recap, let's run that actually. And here is a URL to our a GET request, a Jira REST API GET request. Not going to go into the details of it, but basically it's requesting an issue with this ID VP1. That's just a project issue that I've created in there, and we're providing a username and a password that I've just pre-populated, and then we can select the different types of authentication. Now for this video I'm going to take these boxes off because they're not really required. We're just going to use basic authentication that we construct ourselves. So let's do that now. Actually, I didn't run it, did I? Let me just run that to make sure it's still all working. There you go. So it's gone to our Jira server REST API and it's brought back all the JSON. Cool. All right. So as I said, we're going to remove this really just to get rid of some clutter. And then if we look at the code behind, what we had done, or what I had done, was I was using those checkboxes to perform a bit of logic and set some attributes of our REST client, basically the type of authentication and the technique that we were using. So that's completely redundant now. We'll take that out. And if we pop over to our REST client class, there was some code in there that did something sort of built our authentication header if we're using basic authentication, and a roll your own technique. Again, if none of that makes sense to you, watch the video, but we don't need any of that. We are only using basic authentication, so we're just going to take all that out and we'll just leave that there. So basically we use the username and password in our form. We create a string based on the standard for basic authentication, and then we add it to the headers of our request object. And the request object is still the central object that we're using in this video to do posting. All right, so that should still work. Okay, actually let's run it. It should still work. Yeah, cool. All right, so it's all tickety-boo.
Everything is tickety-boo.
So we'll very quickly now, if we just refer to our wireframe, and I'll actually go to my blog at binarythistle.com, and yeah, there's our wireframe. So we want to make it look like that. The blog just takes you through basically the same steps that we're going through in the video. If you prefer a written version, then please check it out. This is what the form will obviously look like, and if you want to follow the code absolutely step by step, then I've provided the naming convention and even going so far as to provide the anchoring of each of the form elements. I'm going to do that now. It will take a few minutes to do. I'm not sure exactly at what point I'll pick up the proper coding next. If you're getting a bit impatient, I will flash up the time at which that starts in the video. Once I've done the video edit, then I'll know when that is. For those of you who want to watch this, well, let's do that now. And I'll try and be as entertaining as I possibly can be while I'm doing this. I do appreciate it's quite boring. So let's move this over, the Go button. We'll change the anchoring as per the blog article, and that's just to keep it aligned in the right area. Next thing we'll add is the combo box that will, the user selects what type of HTTP verb is being used, in relation to the API request. Now, you obviously wouldn't put this on a production application. You wouldn't be getting a user. Can you imagine that, getting a user to select the verb? I mean, that'd be crazy. It's really just for testing purposes here and demonstration purposes that I'm doing it. So we're calling it CBO verb. Okay, let's do that. CBO verb, we'll anchor it to the top and right. And then we'll add our verbs that we want. So we'll set the text just to get, and then we'll add our items. Now I'm just going to add get and post. Of course, as we build this up, as we go through the series of videos, we'll add other ones in there as well, but for now, just get and post. Fantastic. Now, as per our wireframe, I don't know why I did this, but we're going to move this down. Actually, I do know why I did it. It makes more logical sense to group our next text box up with these other things. I've spent a bit of time as a business analyst, and one of the roles of a BA, if you don't know, is to define user requirements. And one of the most infuriating things is when a developer, and I was a developer as well for many years, doesn't actually adhere to your requirements document. It's absolutely infuriating. So I'm going to eat my own medicine or drink my own medicine and absolutely follow it to the letter. So it's a multi-line text box, and this is probably, I mean, everything's important. Without any of this stuff, nothing would actually work, but for the purposes of this video, this is probably the most important element that we're adding right now, because this is where we are going to put our post data. And by that I mean, when we make a post request, ultimately what you're wanting to do is effect a change at the endpoint. Add an item to a database. So we're going to be adding an issue to our Jira database ultimately. And the data that goes in here is effectively the issue information. What project are we adding it to? Is it a task, a user story? Who was the user that created it? And a whole myriad of other bits of data. That's where it's going to go. And we'll add some scroll bars to it as well. Vertical. We never add vertical, never really add horizontal. Okay. Let's just quickly run that, make sure that all looks kind of as we wanted it to. Yep. Fantastic. And then I think the only other thing, looking at the wireframe, which I'll flash up on the screen, I've got it flashed up as part of the video edit, is the clear and copy buttons. So let's add those now. Oh, I hate when that happens. You kind of drop it and drag it and it minimizes it. Horrible. Now these are actually more of a time saving device for myself, because I find when I'm demoing it, I'm constantly clearing it and copying to clipboard. So I just thought I'd put these buttons on here to do that. Okay, and we'll just set the anchoring, I believe bottom left. Yeah, that's correct. Okay. Great. Let's just see if that looks okay. Looking good. Yep, fantastic. We'll wire up the event handlers for these. There we go. Now I've just noticed I've got a click event on our label 2. I don't know how that happened. I possibly double clicked it at some point, so I just need to find what that is. There we go. How about that for potluck? Again, I don't name my labels, so maybe that's a reason why I should name them in case something like that happens. Anyway, if you don't know this, to remove the event, you can go to this little lightning arrow here and you'll see what event handlers are wired up for that control. You can just reset it and that will unwire it. It's the most elegant way of doing it. And if we go back to our code, it should have removed it. There you go. Perfect. So let's copy these into our region. And it was good, I actually had a comment on the video that somebody said, quoted a very influential agile thinker and coder, that you should not use regions. Only people who use regions do it because they're ashamed of their code. I laughed at that. I liked it. I liked that comment. It was very cheeky. To be really honest with you, I mean, that's not what I do at all. I do it hand on heart because when I'm doing videos, I don't want the screen to be cluttered. So putting things in regions, I think, is excellent. And I also use it in my own code anyway, even if I'm not demonstrating it. I use it just to help organize my code. I think it looks neater. And if you name the regions correctly, you know, they make a lot of sense. So I don't actually agree with that comment, to be honest with you. I liked it though. It was a good one. Okay, yeah, so just to go back there, the clear button just effectively clears, sets the text attribute of our text response to an empty string. Copy is not much more complex, but we're basically just accessing the clipboard. If I can find it, clipboard, there you go, on the offer forms object. And we're just going to, there's various commands here. You can set audio, data, blah, blah, blah. We're just going to set text. There we go. And what we sent it to, just the contents of the box, really. All right, there you go. They're wired up. Another, I think, relatively useful little bit of, oh, so we get build errors. Let's see, where did we go wrong? Oh, I must have just copied them. There you go. Let's try that. That's better. Must have just copied them rather than cut them. There you go. Let's just try that. Type in anything. We'll copy it. Clear it. Clears it. If we go into a notepad, which we will be using later in the show, let's paste. Yep, cool. That all works. Fantastic. Okay, so now we are actually ready, dun dun dun, to start coding. You'll be pleased to hear. So let's stop that. And we're going first to our REST client class that you will be familiar with. Now, just quickly again, going back to the blog article, there was a class diagram. There we go. Everything's stayed the same from the previous videos, but we are adding this new attribute post JSON to our REST client class. So let's add that now. It would help if I was looking at the right code, wouldn't it? Okay. So again, it's just a string. And let me just refer to a little scratch pad I have here. Yeah, it's just been called post. It's just called post JSON. And we're going to get it. We can get it and we can set it. Cool. We're not really using these in this video, but I'm leaving them in because we maybe use them at another point in another video. Now, so following setting our authentication stuff, which is done here, and prior to making an actual request or getting a response, should I say, using the get response on a request object. From this point down, everything is exactly the same. We're not changing this irrespective of making a get or post request. That is not changing. So again, watch the authentication video or even the original REST API client video to get the lowdown on that. That's not changing. All we are changing is the if we're making a post request. So again, possibly not the most elegant way of doing it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see what method we had set on our object. So if we've set it to post, okay, and also the attribute we've just added, our post JSON attribute, does not equal an empty string, then we're going to set up making a post request. Otherwise, we're just going to make a get request by default. Okay, so request method post, and the post JSON attribute is not empty. Then we're going to do something interesting. Now, this first part is setting the content type on our request object. And it's really, really important. I actually omitted this when I was first playing with the code. And it caused, I think it's a 415 error from memory. And I think that's something like media unsupported or something like that. I can't quite remember. But basically that's just saying on a request object, the content type, and by content type we're referring to our payload of data. In this instance is going to be JSON. If you're using something else, if your API is expecting some other type of data, then you would set that accordingly. Okay, very important. And when we come to testing it, I'll actually remark that line out, take that line out, and you'll see what actually happens. We'll generate an error. And then really the last thing we're doing, it's actually not a lot of code in this video, using a using statement, don't know if that's good English, we're going to create a stream writer object. And we'll call it SW for stream writer JSON payload. And that's what we're going to use to write our data to our request object. So we'll set it up here, new stream writer. And then in order to, when you're constructing it, you basically give it the stream that you're wanting to attach to and to write to. And in this instance, again, it's a very important request object. And it's get request stream. Okay. So this is effectively the whole meat and gravy. There's one other line of code that is important, but that's setting up this object, a writer object, so that we can actually start to write data. And when you establish it, we're basically passing in the get request stream of our request object, allowing us to write our JSON payload. And then we actually do the writing in here. So we're using our object. What do you think we're going to do? Anyone? It would happen to be right in the one we're going to write. And you can see that it says that we write characters to the stream. Very simple. And all we pass in there is our post JSON value, or JSON string. And that really is all we need to do, because after we finish doing that, when we come out of the using statement, so long as this object here is, I'm going to say destroyable, that's not the right word, but I'll remember it in a minute. Disposable, that's it. This object is disposable, then various things will happen and it will automatically close down the stream. But I just like to do it anyway. I'll just show you what I mean by that. I just like to do close. So it says closes the current stream writer object and the underlying stream. That should happen automatically because we created it in a using statement. I like to put it in anyway, just to be doubly sure. And that actually is it. Well, actually, when I say that's it for our REST client class. That should build. We do actually have to do something. We do have to set it up in our form. Yep, so that's all building. So yeah, that's it for our REST client class. We don't need to do anything else there, I don't think, unless I've missed something, but I'm sure we'll get the necessary errors if I have. So all we want to do here, this is our Go button. It's just setting up our object for making a request. Here we're setting the username, password, and getting the response back. And we're obviously setting the URI. We want to set a couple of other things here in order to get this method working. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to switch. What we're going to switch on? We're going to switch on our combo box and what text is selected. Okay, so we actually could use an if else statement here because we've only really got two conditions, but again, I'm just sort of future proofing this for other verbs that we may introduce as we go through the series. So the first one we're going to look for is a post. So if post is selected, then on our client object, we're going to set the HTTP method to post. Okay, and that's just coming from the enumeration that we have set up here. That's where that's coming from. And that's so that our decision logic works in our REST client class. And then the only other thing we're going to do here is set the most important thing, our post JSON equal to txt post data text. Right. Now we could do a check to see if this actually contains anything. We're not, so it would theoretically pass in an empty string, but we're going to catch that, if you remember, in the REST client class anyway. So I think that should be okay. And then that's all we want to do there. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the default clause, and we're just going to default everything else to a GET request. Which really, at this stage, doesn't actually really do anything, because we're all, again, in our REST client class, we're just checking for post. It's slightly redundant, but again, just kind of future-proofing everything. There we go. I think that's it. Let's just build. And all that's left then really to do is just to test it, which we'll do now. I will bring over my version of Jira. I'm not going to go into Jira too much here. It basically consists of projects, so I actually use it to manage the videos that I'm going to make, and then I just created a test project just for this video and other ones. I'll just quickly show you that, and there'll be quite a few issues in there because I've been testing this on and on and on and on. So we've got 14 issues in there right now, so we're going to add another one using our REST API. Just they're very, very straightforward. So yeah, nothing much to be said about that. An issue is really just, yeah, doesn't really matter. It's just something that needs to be done in that project, basically. So we're going to create another one using our wonderful piece of software. Now, this next bit is obviously totally specific to Jira. If you're not using Jira and you're using some other API and you want to test this out, well, you're a bit on your own now, because you're going to have to refer to that API documentation to understand, firstly, the actual call that you need to make, and secondly, what is the expected format or schema of the post data that you need to send there. Is it XML? Is it JSON? Is it something else? And if it's JSON, what is the format of that object? So you're on your own there if it's not Jira. If you are using Jira, then you're in luck, because that's what I'm using. And I had to refer to the documentation and understand what the request is to add issues. That's it there. And it's actually almost identical to this, except you just don't place a code on it, and we set that to post. And the only other thing we then need to do is copy in the JSON structure, which I have here. The Atlassian documentation was okay. I didn't feel it was fantastic though. So I'm going to do, my next video is going to be a bit about deep diving that, but that's a bit too much detail for now. I'm just posting that JSON data into this JSON online editor just so you can see it. And it consists of 4 fields. Project, which, as you saw there's 2 projects in my instance. I'm just adding this issue to the test project. A bit of a summary, which is just the headline of what it is. The ID refers to whether it's a task, a user story, a bug, or an epic. So that code just relates to task, whatever, and then who the reporter is. And in this case, I'm just using my user ID. That's it. That's the bare minimum number of fields that you have to pass to this REST API in order for it to create an object in our database. There are a lot more, but that's outside the scope of this video. So let me just reformat that so it's all on one line, and we'll paste it into here. And fingers crossed, see what happens. There we go. So it's responded back with another JSON string, in this case, basically telling us a little bit about the object that we've created. And the thing that really jumps out the most is this thing here, which is the ID of our new issue, test 15. So here was our number of issues here. If I refresh this, I'm imagining it will put test 15 up the top. There you go. No rest for the wicked, ha ha ha, get it? And it's that simple, really. Nothing really much more to say about it. The only other thing I will quickly show you is if I take out, what was I talking about? The content type. Where did I set that? Yeah, here we are. Let's take that out. And we'll try again with exactly the same data. Take this out. Set it to post. No, that's not the right. That was what I had previously. So let me just recopy that from my Notepad++. Paste it in here. So it's exactly the same data. Should create issue 16. And it doesn't. It says it gives us a 415 error. And yeah, that's something to do with, if we go back to the media type or something, I can't remember. But it makes sense. We're not told that what, yeah, here we are, yeah. We set the content type to JSON. It's important. If you don't provide the specific specifier for your format, unsupported format error. So maybe a bit misleading, because it's not that the JSON's not supported, it's just you've not really specified it as you know what you want to use. Maybe it defaults to something. That's some bit of homework for you if you know that the answer to that. Maybe it defaults to XML or something, I'm not sure. Anyway, look, that's it for this video, posting to a REST API from C#. Once again, I really appreciate all the comments and feedback that I've been getting. It's fantastic. This video is the result of that. Keep it coming, and yeah, please subscribe to my channel. It's, you know, it keeps me going, it gives me motivation if I think people are finding benefit from my videos. Again, all comments are welcome, but please be constructive in doing so, because it helps me get better and make better videos for you guys. So again, thanks for watching. Remember to pay a quick visit to my blog. The whole video is on there, and yeah, you can copy the code directly from here if you are that way inclined. Thanks again, and I'll see you later.